Today, we have a crazy revenge story about a disgruntled ex-employee getting revenge after 9 months. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, petty sabotage at warehouse job. Close to 25 years ago, I was working my way through school with a crappy warehouse job. A driver and one of my colleagues got into it because the truck my friend loaded had a couple pallets out of order. This happens when later orders come in and we can cram an additional pallet to the back of the truck. Instead of delivering it, the union driver came back to the warehouse, had a tantrum, and set us all back an hour or more of mandatory overtime. Driver was vested and could simply leave at the end of his 8-hour shift. So he didn't do his job, had a tantrum, and screwed over like 20 coworkers. The next truck my friend loaded for him might not have even been in pallets. It was like a hurricane filled the truck. Stupid, but he was ticked to making point. The driver got to destination, opened truck door and called, filed a complaint and walked off the job, leaving the truck at the deliver location fully loaded. Management wasn't present since it was the middle of tri-night, and my friend was still ticked. I told him I'd take care of it with him. That evening, after all the other work was completed, we clocked out 15 minutes early. Then we drove to warehouse off the clock, worked like 3 hours fixing everything and took pictures. Then we filed a complaint about the driver. When management compared the complaints, us versus driver, we could show we did our job and his and clicked our 3 hours early while he worked 2/3 of a shift and had a tantrum about what was obviously a minor inconvenience. Friend and I got $2 an hour raise and minor promotion, and driver was written up. So, early thoughts on this: when you're working in a team environment, if someone doesn't do their job, the work still has to get done, which means other people ultimately are going to have to pick up the slack. The good thing is that these two were actually compensated for doing the extra work, and I can speak from personal experience when I say this is not always the case. Also, hi, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these pro-revenge videos, it'd be awesome if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to our podcast. That said, our next story is no-name delivery service driver screw-up goes unpunished and unreimbursed. So I was looking forward to a small package of specialized parts. I had to order from AliExpress because they weren't available anywhere else. Of course, it gets handled by some carrier I've never heard of. I make sure to always have a buzzer code on my actual shipping details because I live in an apartment building with no lobby person/concierge, so it's much safer to have it delivered right to my unit. On the day of the delivery, I get a buzz and it's the driver. I let him in, but instead of delivering it to my unit, he decides to be lazy and just dumps it in the mailroom because time is money, I guess. The screw-up begins because the driver, when entering, holds the door open for a homeless person. And once he leaves, this homeless guy just starts tearing through anything left in the mailroom that isn't nailed down and steals whatever he can. The building manager has everything on camera, and we file a police report, but chances of police actually catching this person are slim, especially because the part itself is worth exactly $60, and I doubt they're putting in much legwork for that. To no one's surprise, both AliExpress and the carrier don't give a crap that the package was stolen. They claim it was successfully delivered, their evidence being a photo of the intact package in my mailroom. I try to convince them that my mailroom is not my unit as specified on the package. I only received an empty box, and therefore not successfully delivered, but they don't care. No refunds approved. I'm crap out of luck on the $60, even though it was 100% their driver's fault. So my revenge starts with a chargeback through my payment method. They mention they require a police report to be uploaded to prove what I've claimed was true. The main problem is that getting a copy of this report costs $55, but the Mr. Petty Roosevelt in me decides it's worth it. Today, I just received the $60 refund in my account, and I couldn't be prouder. I guess the real winner here is the police department, though. Yeah, so sometimes proving the point and being right is more valuable than any kind of monetary compensation you can get. In a situation like this, if they're being so stringent that they didn't make any mistakes, you just want to win. You want to fight the good fight and stick it to them. So that's what OP did here. Good for you. Tiki_Tavi commented, I ran into something similar when ordering parts from the manufacturer of my laser printer. They sent the part 3 times. The first time the delivery person shows delivered a newspaper box. We don't have those at my apartment. The next attempt showed it as delivered with a photo of a house. Yeah, again, not my apartment. The final time it showed it delivered to an apartment in my complex, but not mine. I went to that apartment and found the box ripped open and tossed aside. Since it was an item that had no value to anyone except an owner of this laser, they had tossed the part as well. So in the end, I got my part, but I learned enough to specify that delivery from Uni is not acceptable when I order from them. I always specify DHL since the parts are international. OP responded saying, Uni was also the carrier in this case. They acted like they cared and understood on the phone, but denied my claim and any appeals I tried to raise. I even caught them claiming to successfully deliver the package to my unit, even though the photo they sent clearly shows that was not the case. Our next story is Petty Flex on dbag in office. My department at my old job was mostly artists working a day job, but there was this one guy who joined the team late who I'd describe as a wannabe finance tech bro. Somewhere between Ryan Howard when he joined corporate, John Ralphio, and Andy Bernard during his Stanford era. He turned every conversation into an excuse to talk about how great he thought he was. I made a ton shorting stocks. I can't wait until the next crash. I'm gonna make a killing. You hear about that new account I closed? I'm gonna try to get them to fly me out to Shanghai to announce it. But nothing he was proud of vibed with the team, so everyone hated him. Anyway, he had a Rubik's Cube at his desk and would work on it all the time. So one day, I just started finishing it for him whenever he got up to use the bathroom, or get lunch, or go to a meeting. Sometimes he'd be really proud he solved one side, and then he would leave and come back to a finished cube. Eventually, he started locking it in his desk and would take it out to play with it, then put it away when he was done. After a while, I never saw it again. Pretty simple prank here. The thing about solving a Rubik's Cube is once you know how to solve it, it's easy, right? It's kind of like playing a bar chord on a guitar for the first time. You know, it seems daunting and difficult at first, but once you do it, it's just like second nature, right? So that's a good way to, I guess, maybe flaunt some intellectual superiority. It's like, hey, I can solve a Rubik's Cube. From Hell, he commented, the rage and embarrassment he had to feel each time he came back. And he never knew who the smart butt that could solve it easily was OP. Perfectly petty. OP responded saying, yeah, he definitely didn't figure it out at first, but I think another coworker told him it was me after he started getting genuinely frustrated, thinking I was doing it all in good fun. He asked me about it once and I said, I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. Our next story is, kid annoyed me, so I beat him in his sport. There used to be a guy at my school who was a year older than me and maybe 2 to 3 centimeters taller than me. He wanted to become a basketball pro. It was his life dream. Problem was, he couldn't play. He was fat, never cared much to practice, and was at best decent. During a physical education class, he kind of started getting on my nerves as usual, and I decided I had enough. I'd never practiced basketball to this, so I practiced for 3 months. Not much, but about 2 hours every week. Sometimes more if I had free time. Fast forward 3 months and it's break time. I call him out to a basketball, 1v1. We played and the score was 14-8 in my favor. It's safe to say his spirit was crushed after that, especially since the whole school was watching. I actually feel kind of bad looking back to it. We were 14 and 15 then. Okay, so my personal thoughts reading this story. First of all, who plays a basketball game to 14? That seems like kind of a random, arbitrary number to play a 1v1 to, but regardless, the message came across loud and clear. It's like, what better way to show up a bully or someone you don't like than to beat them at their own game. So, good for you. Bagel with Cheese commented, I somehow feel like your opponent was my brother. He was such a butt in school and kept talking about how one day he'd be in the NBA, despite never playing basketball anywhere except via video games. One day he just stopped talking about it. Life has been tough on him, mostly because of his terrible choices and treating people as disposable, but he still acts as if any day he's going to be rich and famous at 57. Such a loser. Our next story is Detergent Chaos. A coworker of mine was living in a building with shared laundry. There is a shelf that residents used to leave their laundry detergent. Someone kept using her detergent, so she labeled it more clearly, adding, "Please do not use." Her detergent was clearly still being used and she'd had enough. She's a super sweet, bubbly person, always has a good attitude, is kind to everyone. So I was shocked when she told me in her usual cheerful voice that she refilled her detergent container with Drano, a strong chemical drain cleaner. She smiled and giggled. That'll teach them. This was towards the end of my rotation, and I never got to have a follow-up convo with her, but I still wonder if the thief completely disintegrated their clothes, or if this could have damaged the washer. Either way, incredibly petty. Okay, so this is just funny. I mean, regardless of the lack of courtesy of using someone else's stuff without asking, then she puts up a sign saying, please stop. You're still using it, so yeah, you deserve to have Drano all up in your laundry if you're going to continue to defy those requests. So great comeback, I love it. Our next story is, scream at me for 40 minutes on the phone? Enjoy getting investigated by the IT department for a data breach. When I was working for local government, I was manning the phones on the service desk. We were about to finish for the day, like we were preemptively putting our coats on because we were about to sign off and leave. That's how close we were to 5 p.m. At 4:59 and 45 seconds, 15 seconds before the phone lines closed, someone decides to call the service desk. Let's call her Jane A. Jane had issues logging into her mobile phone. Okay, easy. Probably needs a quick password reset. It'll take a few minutes to do and we'll be on our way. Oh boy, was I wrong. She decided that this was my fault, demanded to talk to the mobiles guy who had already left for the day at 4 p.m., and that was also my fault. Seeing where this was going, I popped her in mute while she was rambling and asked my manager if I could hang up because she was rude. My manager took this opportunity to listen into the call from her desk, and what came was absolutely mind-blowing. For almost 30 minutes, I was screamed at by Jane, who decided that she didn't want any of my help because it was all somehow my fault. I offered to pass it right over to the mobiles guy so he could pick it up first thing in the morning, because if she doesn't want to go through troubleshooting steps to help her out, then there's nothing else I can do. More screaming continued. I was meant to go home 30 minutes ago and was now being verbally abused during my unplanned overtime. I killed her with nothing but kindness, which didn't work. She agreed to let the mobiles guy pick it up after another 10 minutes of screaming. We hung up and I broke down because I was so angry I couldn't say anything to her. I was in tears. My manager was furious with her. Worst of all is, she's a colleague. She couldn't believe that she'd speak to a colleague that way. The next morning, my manager brought in a box of chocolates for me and went straight to our department leader to complain. I got a letter a week later from Jane, apologizing to me. Then, all of a sudden, she disappears. No active directory profile for her, she'd been fired. Turns out, she was actually using another colleague's account for her mobile phone and accessing their files. Jane's colleague, who also shared the same first name, let's call her Jane B, worked in child protection, and Jane A was accessing files she had no business getting into. Massive GDPR breach. She got hold of Jane B's username and password. She passed all the security checks using Jane B's information and got herself fired, all because she couldn't access Jane B's mobile phone and threw a fit to the person who had enough patience to let her scream at them for 40 minutes. I got extra pay for those 40 minutes, a box of chocolates, an apology, and she got herself fired for verbally abusing me and getting investigated by the IT department. So let this be a life lesson to people that actually act like this. Screaming and yelling and belittling people over the phone is never, ever going to make the situation better. Even if that person is in a position to help you, they're probably not going to give their all after you've just made them feel like dirt under your shoe. So karma made a round trip right there, bit her right in the backside. Awesome. Marionette commented, when I was on the IT service desk for a similar government organization, we had staff calling in all the time from different departments. Had a similar situation to yours where a lady called at 4:55 because she was trying to send from a shared mailbox, but that didn't work. So obviously it was all my fault. After about 10 minutes of her yelling and me checking her access and trying to troubleshoot, I told her that I wouldn't have her speak to me that way and would be hanging up due to our right to safe workplace policy, etc., etc. Right before I hung up, she threatened that if I didn't help her, I'd be breaking GDPR somehow. Anyway, the next morning I emailed her line manager, CC'd mine, HR, and the woman in question, with a detailed summary of the call, links to the safe workplace policy, and said I'd like to file a complaint against her. Found out that she was trying to send from a mailbox that never existed because she spelled the word medical wrong. Don't know what happened, but I received a profusely apologetic email and a notification that, quote, appropriate action had been taken. Probably just got put on a mandatory training course or something. Nice to hear your story end up with better consequences. Our next story is, I used my day off to teach my brother a lesson for making people hate. So a while ago, I posted on a different sub asking if I would be the bad guy for leaving my brother at home every time he makes me late. I'm a senior in high school and he's a sophomore, and I drive him to school every morning even though he could have taken the bus. I decided to warn him many more times than I should have that I will leave without him if he isn't ready by the exact time we have to leave. It took a few days, but he learned his lesson and he now takes the bus. The issue is that he misses the bus all the time, so my mom takes him to school. If you read my initial post, you know my mom adores my brother and she knows I exist, at least. She never told him anything like, "You need to be up on time. You can't keep making me late to work," or anything like that. Well, yesterday was a senior skip day at my school. If you don't know, that's when everyone in the senior class have the day off, just for funsies. My mom and older brothers also had work early that day, so my brother had to either make it on the bus or I'd have to wake up early to take him. Guess what? He missed the bus. I could tell he still didn't learn to respect other people's time and learn to get the F up and such. Since I had to take him to school on my day off, I decided to make it fun. I told him as we were getting in the car that he needs to be on time. He laughed at me. What? I said, okay, if you don't want to respect my time, I won't respect yours. The rest of the morning, I made him just slightly late. Oops, I forgot my wallet with my license in it. Let me take 2 whole minutes to pretend to look for it, even though I know where it is. Oopsies. My car has frost on it. Let me turn the defroster on and wait much too long for the frost to melt. Zoinks! My phone won't connect to my car. How am I going to drive you to school without listening to Pierce the Veil? I guess I have to figure this technology out before we start driving. Eventually, I think I made him late enough. We needed to leave the house at 7:10 and we ended up leaving at 7:19. The universe was on my side for once because every traffic light was red. Traffic was awful. School starts at 7:30 and he ended up getting to class at 7:48. I hope and pray he never makes anyone late again, but considering he's such an imbecile, I don't know if he'll ever learn. Wee little update. People are saying I should have left him at home. I considered it, but our mom told me very sternly that if he misses the bus, I have to take him and she doesn't play. At the same time, she also told him to get on the bus or he'd be in trouble. I don't think he'd ever been told he'd actually be punished for something before, so he was really panicking to get to school. Not enough to wake up on time for the bus, but still. He was very upset when he realized he missed the bus, and for once, he was the one urging me to hurry up. A lot of commenters were saying he didn't learn his lesson. I don't know that he ever will, but I've never seen him actually try to be on time until that morning. I feel like most of the issue is my mom being too lenient with him. Now that she actually scolded him for once, he gets a taste of what it's like to have a parent be a parent. One commenter said something like, "Great, you stood up for yourself. Now learn to stand a bit taller." And honestly, I'm gonna live by that until I go to college. Someone also said I should have let him fall on his face. Funny story, he was rushing to get into the building after I finally dropped him off so quickly that he tripped and did, in fact, fall on his face. So I personally am a very punctual person. I get physical anxiety when I'm running late for things, and what I know of people that are habitually late is that it's just that. It's part of their DNA. They're not going to change. It's just the way that they are. As frustrating and infuriating as it is to deal with people like that, they will never learn. They will always be late to things. So you did the best you can, OP. Harry_Smutter commented, "Nah, screw that. I would have flat out told him he's SOL. You're letting him walk all over you. He's never gonna learn and may turn out to be a monster if this continues." Our next story is how a Petty Glassdoor Review got a toxic VP fired and saved a company. This title is way too dramatic, but ChatGPT suggested it and I loved it, so here we go. I used to work at a small family-owned business in sales. The owners were distant and only cared about money. But overall, it was a good place to work and I enjoyed my time there. However, after 2 years, they hired a new VP of sales who completely ruined the work environment. I won't go into the details, but he was a nightmare and made many people's lives miserable. After 6 months, I and 2 other well-respected employees quit within a few weeks of each other. During my exit interview, I was very honest with the owner about how the new VP was affecting the company culture, but he didn't take it seriously. It was clear he was firmly backing the VP. A few weeks later, while I was waiting at a doctor's appointment, I came up with a petty yet clever idea to take a shot at the VP. I left an anonymous Glassdoor review for that job, posting as a current employee who was looking to jump ship to a competitor due to the awful new VP. I also wrote that everyone in the company had one foot out the door and was looking for new jobs. I knew this would freak out the owners, and it did. The next day, I found out from old colleagues that the VP was working from home, which was weird at the time, and the owners privately met with every single employee to gauge their happiness and opinions on the VP. People were honest, and the VP never stepped foot in the office again. I later heard from employees that the work environment improved dramatically, and the owners promoted a solid internal candidate to replace him. The company has since grown a lot. I never told a soul what I did. I'm taking too much credit for it, but it's funny how my petty, shady review turned out to have such a big impact, not just on getting rid of an awful boss, but on improving the company in the long run. So deceptive means here, but they yielded positive results. I mean, honestly, sometimes it's more about the destination than the journey that you took to get there. So this is probably the best outcome. Remagini 2020 commented, "Sounds like the best result. I once quit a job and told the head of HR everything. They were located in a different country, so didn't know what was actually happening. They ended up firing the guy responsible. Part me, part the other 8 people who they then interviewed saying the exact same things, but by that time I had lost any love I had for the company and still left." Our next story is, police officer blocks the handicap parking spot and gets wrecked. Happened years ago. My dad is a paraplegic, but is able to drive a specially modified car. He needs the handicap spot so that there's enough room to maneuver his wheelchair. One day, him and I decided to go watch a movie at the local mall, but when we got there, we find our usual parking spot occupied by a police car. My dad decided the best alternative spot would be right behind the offender. He wouldn't be blocking the road, only that one spot. We proceeded to go and watch a movie, and had a nice meal at a restaurant. Took our sweet time too. About 5 hours later, we decided it was time to head home. So as we left the mall, my dad hung back to pay for the parking, while I went ahead to open up the car to load him and his wheelchair. When I approached the car, I was immediately confronted by a steaming buffalo of a man. He asked me, "Is this your car?" To which I responded, "It sure is." He went off like an exploding rotten whale carcass. He called me every possible expletive his pea-sized brain could summon. As I walked around the car, I saw that he had plastered about 20 parking tickets to the windscreen. It's worth noting that we did not have a handicap sign in the window at the time. I just calmly let him finish his tirade as I waited for my dad to join me, which happened about a minute later. I swear, the look on his already bovine face made the whole tongue lashing absolutely worth it. He immediately started backtracking and apologizing, trying to cover himself, but the damage was done. Apparently, he was just popping into the pharmacy to pick up something. As he started ripping the tickets off the windscreen, my dad stopped him to ask what he was doing. He tried to play it off, but my dad insisted that he would be delighted to have his day in court for this one. In the end, after some truly pathetic groveling, we decided to let him off with a warning. Edit. For those calling BS, I'm not going to reply individually. This was in South Africa in the late 90s. We were well known to the mall security because they would assist my dad in getting in and out of his car when he went alone. The police officer would have a hard time explaining to the towing service why he was parked in a handicap spot, especially if the mall security was around to vouch for my dad. This was before cell phones. Edit 3, with cameras. Edit 2. Yes, the cop would have to explain the tickets that he withdrew. We never followed up. Listen, I appreciate the police that dutifully serve and protect our peace and safety, but this guy and cops that just think that they're above the law, this kind of stuff just makes me chuckle. So good to see that he got his comeuppance in this particular situation. BattleAxe 1959 commented, "I have a handicap play card due to multiple spinal surgeries and a new knee that isn't working according to specs. When I arrived at the grocery store, the 4 handicap spots were taken by a pickup with an extended bed and no play card. I called the local PD and they told me it was private property and they had no jurisdiction. so not true. I took some photos because I was going to post something about entitled a-holes. Since there wasn't any parking, I parked on the end where there are printed hatch lines. Guess who got a ticket, and guess who didn't? The truck was still there. I went to court and explained to the judge what happened. Judge asked the cop why the truck didn't get a ticket. Didn't see it. The judge let me go. Donald Turnup responded saying, "Was the cop under oath when he said didn't see it? Seems like a pretty clear case, and I'm sure that anyone that the officer has ever testified against would be interested in obvious perjury or blindness." Our next story is Revenge 9 months after being made redundant. So I worked in a technical support team based at a client site late in the 90s. One of my colleagues, a bit of a kid, didn't like sharing information, left our company and went to work directly for the client. Okay, it happens. Some months later, I had an interview to also work for the client. I absolutely killed the interviews. Whole day of various tasks with a dozen people, until it got to the final interview that this ex-colleague was also asking questions. I found out later that I did not get the job because ex-colleague had said I asked too many questions at work. Well, duh, yes, I'm going to ask questions about specific issues if I know you know the answer instead of guessing. Anyway, some months later, it was early December, everyone turned up at the site as normal, only to be called into a meeting with our boss, who must have flown in that morning, and the client manager. Within 10 minutes, we were escorted to our desks to collect personal belongings and escorted off-site, made redundant on the spot. It seems our ex-colleague had managed to cause enough issues and blame his old colleagues that the client, his new boss, canceled our support contract. It took me 3 months to get a new job, and I had to work and live away from home during the week. A few months into this job, I saw the ex-colleague go into my manager's office. I wanted to punch him there and then, but anyway, I waited until he was leaving and made sure to pass him and throw a quick hi as he was leaving. Pikachu face describes it perfectly, even if it wasn't a thing back then. After he left, I went into my manager's office and he confirmed he was interviewing him. I asked if he asked ex-colleague on why he left previous job. He said no. Yeah, this boss was not too bright. As it happens, I knew why ex-colleague was not sacked not long after the rest of us were made redundant, taking his secretary away on conferences, training courses, etc. that she had no business being at. Yes, she was married. So in the end, ex-colleague was not offered a role at the company. In the end, I left the company after 6 months so I could work closer and be home every night, but will always be grateful to that company for giving me the opportunity to get one over a guy who had got me made redundant. Since I cost him financial hardship for a while longer as he did not get the job, I'm not so sure how petty this was, but made me happy anyway. Talixback Reddit commented, "I found out later that I did not get the job because ex-colleague had said I asked too many questions at work. Well, duh, yes, I'm going to ask questions about specific issues if I know you know the answer instead of guessing. I felt this. Exactly the same thing happened at one job, and it was infuriating. No, I don't understand all 300K lines of code after a week. You're surprised? The other guys have been there 15 and 20 years, so of course they know it better. Ugh, sometimes you just need a little petty, shallow victory like that. Regardless of the financial implications, just knowing that you won is enough to help you get in bed at night." With that being said, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, drop a like and comment below, and if you want to check out our other videos, click the video on the right. With that being said, I'll see you all next time.